Hi, Bracha. I guess we'll, yeah. I hope that Sarah will join us momentarily.
All right.
How are you doing?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. I just don't like the idea that you record me, so.
Oh, no problem. We're gonna anyways cut it off. But here, let me, we'll be back. Let's see when Sarah comes. I'll be back in a minute then also.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. Here, I'm gonna send a reminder now. Just wanted to see you first on.
Sorry,
Here,
my
I'm just gonna
class
send the
from Belgium was running late, so
yeah,
like they started late again. They started late, a half hour late. So then I was like, oh, football, not again. Okay.
So let me send the reminder quickly. 1 second.
Hoeveel tijd gekwikt? Maar hoeveel tijd gekwikt?
Hoeveel tijd? Geest niet. 1 second.
Wie veel tijd gekocht van video's? Wel,
One second. Hoeveel minuten is het geweest?
hier 10 minuten.
Okay, let me just finish the
20
reminder.
minuten gewacht. 10,
Hold on one second. Okay, it's
11,
11.
11. Ik denk 11.
Because the entire chest. Okay, where are we? 1 second.
Maar
Wait.
11 minuten gedaan.
Oh, I see that I didn't even post it here. Oh, here. So, oops. Okay. Posted reminder.
Aleba.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, hello.
I'm just eating my lunch.
That's okay. Bobby, I always forget your name. Bobby.
Yeah,
What?
Bracha.
Bracha. Sorry. Bobby Bracha. Okay. I'm gonna rename you. Bracha with an A or an O?
Bracha.
Okay.
It's just with the kids. I always do, Bubby, you know, the grandchildren.
Yeah, I know. They're like, oh, Bobby, I don't know. Rifki, tell us when we want to start, eh?
Yeah, let's start. So let's start with tzedakah, right? And a coin for tzedakah, gedailet tzedakah shemakraves esagiula. We want Mashiach now, and let me get Tehillim for the Rebbe's kapitel, Kuf Chaf Aleph. Shir Lamale, Sasai Naya Lahar Mi Anya the Ezri Mi Ema Dinai, Isi Shamayim Va'aretz, Al Yitain Lamait Raglecha, Al Yanum Shemracha, Hinelaya no Velai Shan Sharma Yisrael, Adonai Shemracha, Adonai Tzilcha, Al Yadi Minacha, Yem Mashemesh Layakeka, Viarech Balayla, Adonai Yishmarcha Mikara, Yishmar Es Nafshacha, Adonai Yishmar Tzeis Chavayacha, Miat Yad Olam. And Rebbitzins kapitel Kuf Chaf Beis, Shir Hamalet to David Samachti Baimrim Li Beis Adin Elech. I'm this how you Raglena B'Sharach Yerushalayim Habnuya Ki Ir Shachubra LeYachtav Shashar Malu Shvatim Shifti Ya Edis LeYisrael LaHaydis LeShem Adinai Ki Shama Yashvu Chisles LeMishpat Kisles LeBeis David Shalu Shalem Yerushalayim Yishlayo Ayavayach Shalem Bechelach Shava Bar Manisech Laman Achai Beri Ai Adabar Nashalayim Bach Laman Beis Adin Elehino Avaksha Tevlach. So a whole week passed and we're still here. So maybe we can dedicate today's learning to Shalom Alevi ben Menachem Mendel for Tchias HaMesim along with everyone else and for Mashiach right now.
Amen.
So-
Amen.
Amen. Okay. So. I'm trying to get the right screen here. Okay. All right. So in our last class, we've been talking about the emphasis on the fact that we have to have Malchus Beis David, and that the return of Malchus Beis David is an integral part of an integral part of the future, okay, and that it's a key part of it. And we're saying that from the time that Hashem gave David a melech, that Keser Malchus, throughout history, there's always been a melech from Beis David. that Melech, even though we had other kings, and we saw like during Malchus Yisrael, Malchus Yehuda, still the neshama connection that Malchus Beis David has with the Yidden was always there. And so we were saying that from the time we see that even after we didn't have our own Melucha, after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, we still had like a Rosh Hashanah who was from Malchus Beis David, like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And one of the key things about the Nasim that we have, and like our Nasim that come from Beis David, is that one of the elements of this desire for Mashiach is to bring people to recognize, to be connected to the Nasi Hadar, to be connected to that Melech who is there in every single generation. So we want to go on to try to understand what this is, because obviously throughout all the time, we don't always see this in a very explicit way of who that Nasi, who that person is from Malchus Beis David. So tonight's topic is the Malchus L'Loi Hakar V'Samchos Chukis. So what do we mean when we say we can have kingship without people recognizing it or without any legal authority? And that's what we want to continue tonight on terms of that idea of someone from Malchus Beis David in every generation. So V'hinei Kanal, as we've mentioned before, Chazal Tinas et Misharis Rosh Hagala Kedugma Hemshech HaHanhaga Shel Beis David HaNitzchi. The Chazal pointed to the idea as an example, the idea that we have of the Rosh Hagala that was in Babel, as an example of how we can see this hemshech of Beis David, that you had Beis David during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, and that you still had, even after the time of the destruction, that Beis David was eternally our leaders, as we saw with the Rosh Hagala who came. Now, if we find in the words of Chazal, and the fact is that the Rosh Hagala, the one who was in charge, who oversaw the Yidden in Babel, he was like a king. From a legal point of view, Rosh Hagala nechshav kesar u'mayshel haYehudim Babel. The Rosh Hagala was literally like a ruler over the Yidden in Babel. He had that power, and the power was given to him by the Goyim to have that power as well. In a certain way, he had also like an independence over the Yidden. In other words, he was given a certain amount of autonomy to rule over the Yidden. He had like policemen there to enforce his word. And there are times he even had sort of like an army to fight, and all of that was done with the permission and with the power of Bavel, of the rulers of Bavel. So the Rosh Hagala did have, in some way, was like a king. He had that rulership, and he had that power, and he had the authority, and he had a certain amount of autonomy. But what we know is that after generations, and generations following, we no longer had that position of a Rosh Hagala. And even though, like we said before, in every generation we still have leaders who come from Beis David, Kanal, as we mentioned. You can't compare the leaders that we've had since that time to the leaders that we had during the time when we had a Rosh Hagala in Bavel, because that was really like a real ruler. Even though we weren't completely independent, there was still a sense of this was a ruler. It was very clear that this was someone who had the legal authority as well over the Jewish people. But from then, we haven't seen that. And so too, we find with our Rabbein, so our Rabbeim, we see them as the Nasi Hadar, but they don't have any legal authority, right? They don't have police. They don't have that kind of authority like the Rosh Hagala had. I'll move on. But even though they don't have that legal authority, we still understand. When we say that it's not obvious they're rulers because they don't have legal authority, that's really only when we're talking about what this kingship looks like on the outside, right? It's the external elements of being a king. But when we talk about this inner dimension of Malucha, like we said, what was the change that happened when Hashem gave David HaMelech the Keser Malchus? We've been saying that this, what he got was Haraimus Visnasu Shabanefesh, a certain elevated soul that was now given to David and to all his children afterwards. And now this connection and dedication of the nation to him, that's on the neshama level. So that element of Melucha, which we said is the true element of Melucha, that we did have. It was by our Rabbi. And that was the main thing. That was the main point that we have with our Rabbein, this connection that the Rabbein has, and Nasi Adar, as the head of the generation, as a Rebbe, connected and dedicated to every single one of the Jewish people. And the fact that people are also connected and dedicated to him. And perhaps we could also say, and remember we said at the very beginning of our series that whenever we see this in this sefer, now this again, these are the thoughts of the author, not quoting the words of the Rebbe, but we could say, and perhaps based on this, even more than this, that the real expression of the power of Malchus Beis David, we could say, where do we see the real power of Malchus Beis David? Actually, we see it more in our time than before, because the real power of Malchus Beis David wasn't just in the earlier generation that the Rosh Hashanah had power that was given to him from the Goyish governments, right? The fact that he had power because the Goyim said he could have power, that's not expressing the real power of Malchus Beis David. It's dafka in these generations when we say we don't see that external side of Melucha, we only see the internal aspect of it. We only see that special connection that a Rebbe has with the Am and that the Am has with the Rebbe, right? That's weird, and that's the true koyach of Malchus Beis David. Now, again, to as a preface to this, we can see what's explained in Parshas Vayigash, in Nun Beis, right? The Kesher, the Mifkash and Meforsa by Yehuda v'Yosef, when the Rebbe talks about this connection between the very famous meeting of Yehuda and Yosef, when it says Vayigash Yehuda Yosef, right? When Yehuda approached him, right? Vayigash with strength. Shahaya ze Mifkash shel shtei dimuyos misamlois manhigos v'histagus Yehudas b'zman. So when Yehuda and Yosef met up, right, that Vayigash, that when Rashi says that Yehuda approached Yosef even for war, the Rebbe explained that when they met Yehuda and Yosef, they were these two personalities who represented two different kind of leadership, and the leadership of the Yidden and throughout Golus. The Havdol Shebeneim, what was the difference between these two leaders, Yehuda and Yosef, both leaders? Yosef who manhig chuki, rishmi, shemayna al yidei par l'mash b'cha eretz Mitzrayim. Yosef represented that kind of legal leader, right? Someone who was appointed by Parai to rule over all of Mitzrayim. Which l'chayra seems to represent the greatest hatzlacha a yid can have during Golus, right? And like the Rosh Hashanah in Babel, that the greatest hatzlacha we can have is if the governing Goyish government, right, appoints the yid to have a certain amount of power and rulership. Since though Yosef was appointed through Parai, so even though he was appointed, he was in charge in a certain way, he had power, but he was still obligated and he was subservient to Parai and to Parai's rules, Parai's laws. On the other hand, when we look at Yehuda, what does Yehuda represent? Yehuda, he had no legal authority. When he was in Mitzrayim, he was there as a temporary guest. But when his brother Binyamin was suddenly taken into this dangerous situation, right? When the goblet of Yosef was found in his sack and he was brought back, Yehuda, he goes to Taika Bilti Mukbal. Yehuda then stood up and he demonstrated a leadership that had a strength, an unlimited strength, right? Didn't care that Yosef was this leader appointed by Para in Mitzrayim. He took this on as he came by Yigash with a strength. He stood there opposite Yosef. He stood there in the Heichal, right? In this room, in the palace, you could say, of this ruler of Mitzrayim, Yosef, Habestak. Right? So he stood there in Yosef, in the palace there, in front of this government official. And he stood there with and even though Yosef was standing there surrounded by his servants and surrounded by his army and surrounded by his soldiers, Yehuda wasn't nispal from that. He stood there and he had the koyach, the taikif, the strength to stand up and say, you could say the chutzpah, you could argue, to stand up and say, if you don't give me back Binyamin, and then I'm going to kill you and your master. The Rebbe continues that sicha and he summarizes at the end. Where do we see, who demonstrates the real strength of a Yid? Is it Yosef, who was appointed by Parah? The Rebbe says no. The real strength of a Jew is represented by Yehuda. He's completely not mispelled from this great country of Mitzrayim and its rulers. This strength that is unnatural, it's above nature. Where does Yehuda get this power to stand there in this unnatural, not to take teva, not to take what's going on, what's obvious in the world as a given, and saying, I don't care, doesn't make a difference to him. He didn't recognize Yosef as his brother. Yosef, who seemed to be this stranger, this ruler over Mitzrayim, he didn't care. What gave him that strength? It came because of his connection to the Eibishter, and his connection to Hashem was it was above nature. So he had no problem standing there with full strength and talking to Yosef in that way. Mavar Shammai, the Rebbe explains there even more. The Rebbe tells us that this story really of Vayigash, showing us that this strength, this strength of Yehuda to stand up to Yosef is an example and actually gives us the koyach of how we as Yidden have to act with full strength in the time of Golus, right? That you say the break kai, this koyach, not to be nispal. And the Rebbe says, and again, what does this represent? This again represents a sample of this taikef of what Mashiach is all about, the kingdom of Mashiach. And then again, the Rebbe says it as follows, and here we have a quote from the Rebbe. So we talk about the strength of a Yid in this world and in times of Golus. It could happen in two ways. Aleph, you could say a Yid could have power, he could have strength based on whatever is possible according to nature. So going along with the rules of Teva and what that's like, in other words, we can, if we're in a country that's free, then yes, we can be appointed and we can even reach, levels of government and ruler, in that way. Based on, whatever the limitations are of Golus, Medina, the laws of the land, right? So in many countries, in free countries in the Western world, he can go and he can run for politics and he can be appointed, and he could have a leadership role based on Chukei HaTeva. But there was another way, where a Yid can stand completely above all aspects of this world and the goyim, and especially above Golos, and even more than this, that he deals with this Golos and with the Umas Arlam with strength. To the point that he's not limited by the laws of the land. He can change the laws of the land because he's not expelled from them. They don't stop him from doing what he needs to do. And so we could say, the Rebbe continues, we can then say that the strength of a yid to have the strength of Yehuda, that what we get from Yehuda helps, it enables a yid not only to rule and to be a balabas over the goyim of this world in Golos, based on the rules of the world and the rules of Golos, which is the kind of leadership we saw with Yosef. Yosef was a leader, but within the rules of Teva, because Paro is the one who appointed him. But what Yehuda gave us, what we've inherited from Yehuda, that strength, is a strength that we do not have to be nispal and be limited by the rules of the world. We have the strength of the approach of Yehuda to Yosef. This is a preparation that gives us the kayak to bring the Gula Hamitzvah Shlema. Because then in the Gula Hamitzvah Shlema, it will be revealed in a very complete way in the entire world. This strength of a David Avdi, the Silahem Le'olam. That David, my servant, he is the Nasi. He's the one over all of them forever. And this, of course, is Akasha, and this is what's connected. And of course, this is connected then to the shlemus of the strength of Hashem, because Hashem is the one who appointed Beis David. So that shows that Hashem's taikef, when what he wants and what he desires actually happens, and that, of course, affects all the nations of the world. So what we could say is, this difference then between Yosef and Yehuda, Yosef, a ruler within Chukei HaTeva, Yehuda, a ruler me'al Teva, who has sharish l'chiluk be'machos Beis David be'machos Aseret Shvatim. We could say that this difference is also the difference that we see in terms of machos Beis David and machos of the 10 Shvatim, machos Yisrael. David zacha b'keser machos. Again, we mentioned this before. David merited to have keser machos, right? This inner pnimistic and the shamadika level of machos. V'hu v'zar acharav noisim b'nafsham es koyach haraymu v'isnafsos ha'pnimis shetchilasei kvar b'Yehuda. So we see that with David HaMelech, this idea of keser machos is that he and his children after him carry on a neshama level, this elevated neshama, this idea of this connection that is started with Yehuda. Okay, that's the idea that there's a neshama that doesn't have to worry about this world and is above anything that's in this world. But the kings of Yisrael, the kings over the 10 Shvatim, that are attributed mainly to Beis Yosef. We know Ephraim and Menashe. This is the base of the Aseret Shvatim. They were appointed purely to lead the nation, Canal, as we mentioned earlier. So they represented, they sort of were there on the outside. Yes, they were malachim, they were kings, they had certain laws of kings, but it was mainly on the outside to lead the nation. That inner strength of malchus on the neshama level was not by Malchus Yisrael. So based on all of this, we could then say, based on what we're talking about, so too we could say this is the difference between the earlier generations when we had a position that of the Reish, like the Reish Shagayla, the one who was in charge, who had the strength and he had the authority that was given to him by the Goyim. Right, that's like Yosef. Rosh Hashanah had power, but his power was still, it was limited based on the permission that he got from the Goyim and what he was allowed to do. Just like Yosef in his time. And the difference between that, versus the later generations, and specifically when we talk about our Rabbein, their leadership of us, of Bnei Yisrael, is not because the Goyim gave them permission to lead us. It came from this strength and this raimus of their neshama that they have in themselves personally. That they were able to, by virtue of who they were and their personalities and their drive, that they were able to gather the nation around them and to give themselves over to lead the Jewish people. It was only with that type of leadership that we see it's this kind of leadership that really shows us the true kayach of Malchus Beis David. Right? Not when they're leaders because the Goyim gave them certain powers to be leaders, but when they're leaders because of who they are, that they are dedicated to Bnei Yisrael, and they do whatever they can for Bnei Yisrael, and they are able to gather the Yidden around them. Okay? And as we see, like we said, right, in our generation. So, where do we see an example of this? Liba, would you like to take over, please?
Yes. בדוגמה יוצאת דופן לעניין זה, היא הנהגתו של כבוד קדושת אדמו"ר הריי"צ ומאבקו על חיזוק התורה והיהדות ברוסיה הקומוניסטית. And an outstanding example of that is the leadership of the Frierdiker Rebbe and his fight to keep the Yiddishkeit in communist Russia. שלא זו בלבד שלא הייתה לו רשות מהאומות להנהגתו, אלא שממלכה אדירה ביקשה את נפשו, הוא עמד לנגדה בכל הגאון והעוז של התוקף היהודי בין 1000 השנים, בכוח העל-טבעי אותו ירש מאבותיו, יהודה בשעתו ודוד בשעתו. So it's not only that he didn't get a permission from the Goyim for his leadership, but just the opposite, it's a huge kingdom wanted to kill him, or wanted his soul, and he stood against with all the pride and all the koyach oz of the tokef of a yid of 1,000 years. And in this unnatural koyach that he got as Yerusha from his forefathers, Yehuda in his times and David in his times. ועוד יותר, מסירות נפשו הייתה לא רק על דברים שבגלוי נגבולתו, אלא הוא מסר את נפשו על לא להיות נכנע בפני אלה שאסרו אותו באיזה אופן שהוא. So even more so, his Mesiras Nefesh wasn't only about things that openly were connected to his work, but also he was Mesiras Nefesh for not to be kind of a, how you say, nichna? Giving up.
Subservient in any way, to give in.
Okay. In front of those who put him in jail, in any way. וכמסופר ברשימת המאסר שלו, כיצד אותו בבתי הסורים, התעקש לעמוד על העקרונות שלו, ועד כדי כך שכאשר באו להודיע לו על שחרורו, ולפי חוקי בית הסורים על האסיר לעמוד בעת ההודעה, סירב לעמוד גם כשהיכו אותו על כך, כיוון שהוא בעצם לא יכל להיכנע באיזה אופן שהוא בפני כאלו שמפריעים להרבצת התורה וכולי. So like it says in his Rishima about being in jail, when he was in the jail, he was, how you say, it's Akesh?
He's stubborn.
He was stubborn to stand on his principles, and so much so that when they came to tell him that he is freed, and according to their rules in the jail, when they tell him that he's free, he has to stand up. But he didn't want to stand up, and even when they beat him up, he didn't want, because he didn't want to what's the word? In any way, he didn't want to give in any way. In any way, in front of those who disturb the הפוצץ היהדוס, הבטס התייר. ויש לומר, ההסברה בזה, שהשליטה שיש לגוי על היהודי, שדינא דמלכותא דינא, היא רק בעניינים החיצוניים, ענייני המסחר, בסדר והנהגת המדינה. אך הגוי לעולם אינו בעל הבית ואינו שליטה ליהודי עצמו. So the explanation for that is that the fact that a goy is ruling over a Yid, it's because it's Dina de Malchus Dina, it's the rules of the country and the rules that we have to listen to. But this is only in the external things, like talking about business and rules of a country. But the goy is never balbais, never ruling really a Yid, and he doesn't have any control over the Yid himself. וכדברי המהר"ל הידועים, שמאז יציאת מצרים, בני ישראל אינם יכולים לשוב ולהשתעבד לאף אומה ולשון. Like the Maharal said, it's famous that we said, that since the Yidim left Egypt, מצרים, they cannot never be under any goyim. What does it mean?
להשתעבד לאף אומה ולשון. In other words, we can never be enslaved anymore by any. Once we were freed, I got to the idea that we were from Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're now avodim, right, of the Eibishter. On the Avda de Kuchabrichu. That's it. We're now avodim of the Eibishter. So that gives us the strength. In other words, we're not enslaved.
But we weren't enslaved all this.
What?
Okay. It means like more like in a spiritual way.
Yeah. But even like, so we see like when the Friedrich Rebbe said, you know, you can enslave my body, but my neshama is never enslaved.
Okay.
Yeah. So since Yetzias Mitzrayim, when we were talking there, we were avodim for Parah. But once we became a nation, that's what you say, Ana Avda Kuchabrichu. We are now servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we're not servants to anybody else. But it's also a mindset, right? That we have to realize that we have this taikif, we have this kayach, that we are me'al teva. We don't need to be nichnat to any goy. Because since Yetzias Mitzrayim, we are now the Eibishter servants. We are not servants or slaves to anybody else.
Okay. ובלשונו של הרבי הרייץ, רק גופותינו ניתנו בגלות ושיעבוד מלכויות, אבל נשמותינו לא נמסרו לגלות ושיעבוד מלכויות. So like the Friedrich Rebbe said, that only our bodies were given in exile and being under the goyim, but our neshama were never given in golus and שיעבוד מלכויות. ולכן, כיוון שהעמידה של האסיר בפני השוטר בעת ההודעה באה לבטא את הכנעתו של האסיר בפני השוטר, סירב הרבי למלא הוראה זו בשום אופן ובכל מחיר. So because standing next to the policeman, when they tell him that he's free, it comes to show that the person in jail, he is like giving in front of the policeman. That's why the Rebbe didn't want to do it in any way, in any price. ואומנם, אצל רוב בני ישראל, עניין זה אינו ניכר בגלוי, ומצד חושך הגלות יכול להיות מצב שהיהודי ייאלץ להכניע את עצמו בפני הגוי. אך אצל הרבי, שהוא הנשמה הכללית של כל ישראל, הנה הוא מוסר את נפשו שלא להיכנע בפני הגוי בשום צורה. So by us, most of the Yidden, we cannot see this Inyan explicitly, but because of the darkness of the goddess, and it can be even that a Yid, he must give in front of the goy, but by the Rebbe that he is the general neshama of all the Am Yisrael, so he's Meiser Nefesh not to give in front of the goy in any way. וכמובן, כל זה מעורר ומזכיר את התוקף העל-טבעי של יהודה בהיותו בהיכל המשנה למלך מצרים. הוא מדגיש עוד יותר את הרוממות בהתנשאות העצמית של הרבי כממשיך וממלא מקומם של יהודה ודוד. So this all reminds us the unnatural Turkef of Yehuda when he was by Yosef, but didn't know that Joseph was a Mishnah Lemelech Mitzrayim, and this stresses even more the roimamus of and the like the internal atzmi shel Rebbe.
Status, yes.
Like the one who is taking weiter the work of Yehuda and David. וכנ"ל הנהגה כזו ומנהיגות כזו היא עמוד השדרה האמיתי שמחזיק את ישראל לאורך כל זמן הגלות. And such a leadership and such an hunger, that's the, how you say it?
It's the backbone, right?
The backbone.
It's like a spinal cord, right? It's what's holding us together.
They hold the Yidden through the Golos. הנהגה כזו, שזוהי המשמעות האמיתית של ההבטחה, לא יסור שבט מיהודה, שגם בזמנים הכי קשים של הגלות, תהיה לבני ישראל מנהיגות אמיתית, שתחזיק ותחזק אותה מבלי להתפעל בשום דבר. And that's the real understanding of the הבטחה, that לא יסור שבט מיהודה, but also in the hard times of Golos, we will have a real leadership that will hold and will strengthen all the Yidden, staying strong without being responsible of anything. וכנ"ל, דווקא הנהגה כזו, היא הסוללת את הדרך למנהיגותו הנצחית של משיח, שתהיה דווקא בכזה אופן. And this הנהגה prepares the way for the leadership of the eternal leadership of Mashiach, that it should be also in the same way.
Okay. So, based on that then, what do we mean by Melech Mibeis David bin Dorei? Now, if we understand that Friedrich was like that, right? And this shows that this is the taikip that the person has to stand up, have Mesiras Nefesh to go beyond, above and beyond. So, is anyone else here who would like to read? So we Nechama, Chana, Bracha. Okay. So Liba, then please continue.
מלך מבית דוד בדורנו. והנה הדברים הנ"ל נכונים לגבי רבותינו נשיאנו בכלל, אך כנ"ל ככל שהולכים ומתקרבים לגאולה, הגילוי של מלכות דוד נעשה ברור יותר ויותר. So all the above was true about all the Rabbeim, but especially now when we're coming closer and closer to the times of Geula and to the time of revelation of Malchus Beit David, it becomes clearer and clearer. ונקודת ציון מיוחדת אפשר לראות אצל אדמו"ר הרש"ב, שדיבר במפורש על כך שאנו הננו מזרע בית דוד, ועלינו נאמר שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד. And a special point we can see by the Rebbe Rashab that he spoke explicitly about the idea that we are from Zera Beis David, and on us it says this pasuk that it's the candle will never be how you say, won't go out. והקים את ישיבת תומכי תמימים, בה מחנכים להתקשרות והתמסרות לרבותינו נשיאנו. And he established the yeshiva Tומכי תמימים, that over there they will be educated to be connected and התמסרות to the רבאים, וביאר שתלמידיו הם הינם חיילי בית דוד, ונדרש מהם מסירות נפש לחיזוק התורה והיהדות בכלל, לחיזוק האמונה בביאת המשיח בפרט, ועד לפעול את גילויו של משיח בן דוד. And he explained that his Talmidim, they are the Chayole Beis David, and they need Mesiras Nefesh to strengthen Torah in Yiddishkeit in general, and especially they believe in Mashiach, in coming of Mashiach, till they have to point out that Mashiach will really come. Yeah. והדברים מתקשרים מאליהם זה לזה. שהואיל ואדמו"ר הרש"ב הוא ממשיך מלכות בית דוד, לכן ככל מלך בהודרו, מוטלת עליו האחריות על היהדות בכלל, והציפייה לביאת משיח בן דוד. And the two things are connected from, because the Rebbe said that he is the continuation of the kingdom of Beis David, and that's why, like every king in his generation, he has the responsibility about Yiddishkeit and about strengthening the connection of Am Yisrael to Beis David even more so. And in the times of Golus, what does it mean? Connecting to the Beis David means that we're waiting that Mashiach will come. ויש לומר שזו הסיבה הפנימית לכך שהוא מכתיר את תלמידיו, חייליו, בתור חיילי בית דוד. לא רק על שם העתיד, שהם יפעלו את גילוי משיח בן דוד, אלא גם על שם ההווה, חיילי הרבי, ממשיך מלכות דוד הנצחית. And that's the real reason, and the optimistic reason why he called his Talmidim like Chayolei Beis David. Not only because of the future that they will bring Mashiach, but also about the present, because they have the soldiers of the Rebbe, who is the continuation of the eternal kingdom of David. ואם מתבוננים בזה במבט רחב, הכולל את ההיסטוריה כולה, רואים כיצד לקראת סוף זמן הגלות נעמד נשיא מבית דוד, ואוסף סביבו תלמידים ומקושרים, ומכתיר אותם בתור חיילי בית דוד, ויוצא איתם למלחמה לחיזוק התורה והיהדות, וחיזוק האמונה בביאת משיח בן דוד, ומדור לדור, צבא זה הולך ומתעצם, ופעולותיו הולכות ומתרחבות וכולי, לקראת הגאולה השלמה בפועל ממש. So if we will look in a more wide perspective about all the history, so we will see that it's coming closer to the end of Golos. There is a Nosio from Beis David, and he's collecting Talmidim and Mekusharim, and he gives them the name of Chayolei Beis David, and he goes with them to the war of strengthening Yiddishkeit and Torah and strengthening the Emunah in Mashiach. And from each generation to generation, this army is getting bigger and bigger, and all these Pa'ulas are getting stronger and bigger, coming closer to the Geula. ואפשר לראות בעניין זה התחלה מסוימת של קיום הייעוד של חזרת מלכות דוד ליושנה כנ"ל, כהכנה להתגשמות הייעוד כפשוטו על ידי מלך המשיח. So we can say that this is the certain beginning of this נבואה that of coming of the base of the kingdom of David like it used to be, and this is also a preparation for it should come really through Mashiach. הוא מוסיף על כל זה בדורנו, שמלכותו ונשיאותו של נשיא דורנו היא יותר ויותר מאשר בדורות הקודמים. וננסה לציין בזה בכמה נקודות, בהן משתקף עניין זה כפי קוצר השגתנו. So we see that even more in our generation, that the kingdom of the Rebbe is much more stronger than in the previous generations. And now he said he will try to show in a few points that where you can see it, according to his understanding. הן ברוממות המלכות שבנפש, שגם בעין שטחית אפשר לראות כיצד כל צנועה מתנועותיו של נשיא דורנו, וכל צעד מצעדיו אומר כולו רוממות והוד מלכות. So the first thing that we're talking about is kind of the kingdom in the soul. Even with a simple eye, we can see like every movement of the Rebbe, every step of his steps, everything was showing malchus and remains. You can see that he is a king. והן בהתגלות והתפשטות הנהגתו על העם, שהנהגתו מקיפה רבבות מישראל בכל העולם כולו, בקנה מידה שלא היה כמוהו בדורות הקודמים. And also the way that his kingdom is being opened and is spreading on all the nation, that you can see that his leadership was his leadership was all over the thousands of Yidden in all over the world in such that it was never before so many Yidden that were connected to the Rebbe. והן הצבא של חיילי בית דוד, שבהנהגתו הולך ומתעצם, ופועל לחיזוק היהדות והאמונה בביאת המשיח בכל מקום ומקום בעולם. And also his army, his Chayolei Beis David, that with the Rebbe's leadership, it became much bigger, and all the Pa'ulas strengthening the Yiddishkeit and believing in Mashiach all over the world. כך שלמרות שאין להנהגתו תוקף חוקי כלשהו, אך המציאות היא שיש כאן הנהגה בדרך של מלכות בפועל ממש. So it's like the Rebbe doesn't have his legal strength, legal authority in his leadership, but the reality that his Hanoga is like really like a king's Anhog before you.
Okay, so we have 3 points here. One, you can see it in the Rebbe himself, in the way the Rebbe walked and spoke and everything he did, that's Malchus, like a king. Number 2, the first leader, we have thousands of Yidden who are connected to the Rebbe, right? That his leadership was literally worldwide. We didn't have that before. Because of, the technology, the way the world was, and the fact was, and when the Friedrich came to America, like the Rebbe said, that gave him the power to really spread to the entire world. Number three, the fact that his chayal, his army, is huge, right? Because we're all over the world now. What that spread was never before. So we can see then in these areas, our Rebbe, more than any Rebbe before, have all of these qualities of a true king. And not only that, but now we even go further. Zoisvai, go ahead.
ומלבד אותם רבבות המשייכים עצמם לרבה, הרבה מצדו אינו מגביל את הנהגתו לחסידי חב"ד בלבד, אלא פונה לכלל ישראל באשר הם בבחינת ראיה מהימנה בגילוי של כל אנשי הדור. So besides those people who are feeling connected to the Rebbe himself doesn't limit his hanhaga only to his chassidim, but when he talks to all Am Yisrael, because he is the faithful shepherd of all the Eden of the generation. הוא מגלה אחריות ודאגה לגורלו של כל יהודי באשר הוא, גם לעובדים ונידחים בגשמיות ולעובדים ונידחים ברוחניות. And the Rebbe shows responsibility and care and worry to the faith of every Jew wherever he is. Also, those people who are lost in physical way, and also the people who are lost in a spiritual way. וכמלך אמיתי, שתפקידו הראשון הוא ללכד ולאחד את העם, כך נשיא דורנו מחנך ומלמד ללא הרף על אהבת ישראל ואחדות ישראל כלפי כל יהודי באשר הוא, כפי שיראה כל מי שעוקב אחר דיבוריו, כתביו ומעשיו. And like a real king, like his first job, his first assignment is to unite all the nation. The same way the Rebbe is teaching us without a stop about Ahavas Yisrael, about Achadus Yisrael, unity, and we should feel it towards every Yid, whatever his level is. And whoever looks what the Rebbe spoke, what he did, and what he wrote, you can see that clearly. And another thing, הוא כמלך אמיתי, שתפקידו להגשים את קיום מצוות התורה, ובדרך קבלת עול דווקא, כך כל מי שעוקב אחר נשיא דורנו, יכול לראות כיצד הוא מהווה התגלמות של דברי הרמב"ם, אודות איש, שכל מגמתו ומחשבתו לחזק דת האמת ולמלות העולם צדק. So like a real king, that his job is to fulfill that the Yidden will keep Torah mitzvahs, and dafka with the Kabbalah. So we can see that the Rebbe, he's like the best example of what the Rambam says about the Mashiach, that all his thoughts and all what he's doing is to strengthen Yiddishkeit and to fill the world with justice. הוא עוסק בכך בפועל במידה שלא הייתה כמוה מימות עולם, כאשר נטל על עצמו את המשימה שכל היהודים יניחו תפילין, ויגבעו מזוזה ויאכלו מצה שמורה וכולי, עד לכל מצוות התורה. So we can see that the Rebbe, he did that in a way that was never before in the world, that someone took upon himself this assignment that all the Yidden will put on tefillin, will put mezuzahs, will eat kosher, will eat matzah shmura, until the Rebbe really cared about all the mitzvahs. The Yidden should keep all the mitzvahs. And not only that, הוא פונה גם לאומות העולם בהפצת זין מצוות בני נוח, והנהגת רגע של שתיקה והוספה בכל ענייני טוב וחסד. So it's not only caring about the Yidden, but he cares about all the goyim, and that's why the Rebbe spoke and spread the idea of the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach and this moment of silence, and in general adding all the things of good and chesed. ובהדגשה שאופן הפעולה שלו הוא, בלשון הרמב"ם, הנ"ל בנוגע למלך ישראל, יחוף כל ישראל לילך בה, לחוף העולם כולו לקבל זין מצוות בני נוח, היינו בדרך קבלת עול דווקא. And with the strength that the way the Rebbe did this, like the Rambam said, the Rebbe made it in a way that it should come with a Kabbalah's oil dafka, also referring to the Yidden and also referring to the going with their mitzvahs. What does it mean that the Rebbe Taka made it in a Kabbalah's oil?
So here we see.
כלומר, אף שהגישה הכללית לקירוב יהודים וכולי היא בדרכי נועם דווקא, אך בזה גופה שתי גישות. So the general thing of how the Rebbe said to Mekarev Yidden is with the loving, nice way. But in this loving, nice way, there's two approaches. יכולה להיות הגישה שהדרך של קירוב יהודים לתורה ומצוות צריכה להיות שלכל הראש יסבירו להודות מציאות השם, ומתן תורה ומשמעות המצוות וכולי, ולאחר שעניין זה יקבע בשכלו וכולי, אז אפשר לדבר איתו על מצוות מעשיות. There's one way that we come to the Gidon, and we'll explain first that is Kadosh Baruch Hu, and there's Matan Torah, and the meaning of the mitzvahs, and after they will understand it with their seichel, then we can come and tell them, do the mitzvahs. But אך דרכו של הרבי היא להפך, שיש להתחיל עם יהודי לכל הראש עם מצוות מעשיות בפועל, בדרך של אמונה וקבלת עול פשוטה. But the Rebbe just did the opposite. He started with the Yidden, first of all with mitzvahs מעשיות, and it's like doing things בפועל, through אמונה and קבלת עול simply. ובסגנון לשונו של הרבי בכמה מקומות, בדרך אינו ובתוקף המתאים. Like the Rebbe said, together from one side with love, I guess, in a nice way, but with the תוקף. מתאים לעניינו הפנימי והאמיתי של מלך ישראל, להנחיל לבני ישראל את קבלת עול מלכות שמיים. And this is according to the Indian of a king, that he has to give the Gidon this Indian of קבלת עול. וכנ"ל, התעוררות מחודשת זו של מלכות בית דוד בדורות האחרונים של הגלות, היא המבשרת את חזרת מלכות דוד ליושנה על ידי המלך המשיח. Like I said before, that this new waking up of the idea of the kingdom of Malchus Beis David in the last generations of Golus, this is the fact that shows that it's really coming back through Mashiach.
Right. So the idea of lachof is, in other words, like we see with Yidden, you can do b'darchei noyim, and there are some, Yidden who that's their approach when they talk about, to be makar of their kiruv programs. It's about, they're going to teach Yidden, right? First, you're going to teach them, you'll learn with them, and then when they understand it, you'll get them to do mitzvahs. And the Rebbe was like, no. We start with Kabbalah Sol. We just do mitzvahs. You do them. I mean, you do the mitzvahs, then you learn after. First, it's nasa, then nishma. So the same thing when we see the oifen of when we talk about Yichav Kol Yisrael Eilechba, is that we're enforcing Bnei Yisrael to do it, is that we're not sitting there and explaining it to them and making sure they understand B'seichel and then getting them to do it. We say, no, are you a Jew? Come, put on tefillin. Finished. That's Kabbalah's all. And the same thing with Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. We go out and we give the Sheva Mitzvahs car. We encourage the guy to keep Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. We don't sit there and talk to them about how it's wonderful and how it makes sense to them B'seichel. We say, this is what you need to do, right? This is what we need to do. We want to have peace in the world. This is what you need to do. Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So that's the words of the Rambam. When Rambam says, Yichav Kol Yisrael Eilechba, right? The force is not with a gun to the head, but the force means that it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to understand it in their seichel of why they should do it, but that this is something that has to happen. So the Rebbe was doing this like a true melech, both for Yidden and also for the world at large, right? Saying that these are things that have to happen. Okay, so we just have a little bit more. Let's already finish, and we'll do the sikum next week. Okay, v'hine limrois kohen now. So despite everything that we did till now, Rifki, can you read, or you've got your children there?
I could try.
All right, go ahead.
V'hine lemres kalanal af she'efsher lahagdes rabbeinu nesienu kimalachim v'Rabbi atzma mishtamish be'agdara zu hari hamusag melech kipshuta mahava hagdara chelkis ubilti b'mutza ledmusam shel rabbeinu nesienu. Okay, let's try this. So after everything that we saw above, according to everything that we said, even though we could what's it called? We could call our Rebbeim or categorize them as malachim, as kings, and the Rebbe himself used this what is it, like a description
Title.
or title. The concept of king is only like a part, of who they are. They're not only a king, they're more than that. So there's many facets to who our Rebbeim are, and only one of them is Melech. Because, like we said before, our Rebbe is also a judge, an advisor, and a prophet. והעיקר שהמושג רבה, כפי שהוא מסבר בתרס החסידות, הוא נעלה מעלה מכל המושגים האלו גם יחד. And mainly the title Rebbe, as explained in Chassidus, is much higher than all of these titles together, or all of these concepts together. So the Rebbe is like an all-in-one of so many ways that he helps us. B'nekudas advarim hi al derech hamavor le'el, and didn't even mention, teacher here. B'negeh lemelech hamashiach.
Right, does say v'chulu. Right. Yes.
So the point is, like we said before, b'negeh lemelech hamashiach, she'im hayesei melech harei hu lemayla mikol malachim. So, as we said before, when we talk about King Mashiach, even though he's a king, he's much higher than all other kings. Because like in the style of Kabbalah, Mashiach is the level of Yechida, which is much higher than Malchus. And this is how it is with our Rebbeim. So they are the level of the general Yechida, which is much higher than, infinitely higher than all the titles of king and kain and wise one and prophet. So we're gonna, like till now we were showing how our Rebbe and our Rebbeim in general were malachim, but they're not only malachim, they had a lot of other hats a lot of other shoes that they filled.
Exactly.
And the rest of them we're going to explain in the coming chapter.
May we have Mashiach before then. You won't have to
Before
explain
then.
it here.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next week.
Amen. Thank you. That's just
It was beautiful. Thank you very much, Kol Tov.
Good night.
Thank you, Bracha.